Now, Mr. Johnston, what we have before this committee are two completely different descriptions of your relationship with Justin Trudeau. Those two different descriptions cannot be accurate at the same time. So my question is simple and direct, Mr. Johnston. Were you telling Canadians the truth on May the 23rd or back in 2016?
Complaint, but there's 11 candidates, and you've said in your report that they were victims of a certain form of interference in the election. These were candidates for the election, but you're saying, as there's no complaint, I'm not going to meet with the Commissioner of the Elections, the Director of Elections, and the Chief Election Officer. Is that correct?
Well, Madam Chair, we expect that we will meet with those two officials in subsequent review. What I was saying is that our understanding there were no complaints directed to them that required action with regard to the 2019 and 2021 election.
I'm really aghast at what I have heard.
Being so precious. Allowing the witness to finish a sentence, I do not think would take too much time, and I think it's appropriate just to let the witness answer. Mr. Brock, I agree the time is yours, but let's just be mindful, and I think we can get through this. And I know you can, Mr. Brock, so I'm going to pass you back the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
That's how I round off.
And, you know, that's fact, that's the truth. So be it. That would not be the right thing to do.
Mr. Johnston, with respect, you can't determine how parliamentarians vote or why they vote that way. But as you mentioned, you have a deep respect for Parliament. You do need to heed a parliamentary vote. And I would suggest, as a parliamentarian who cast that vote, I was well aware of your long history of public service, but simply disagreed profoundly with your conclusions.
Well, Madam Chair, I was asked by the government of the day to undertake an important task, to review foreign interference in our elections. I undertook that task and would intend to continue it until my services are simply no longer useful or required. So that's the reason why, with great respect to Parliament, I have a...
Thank you.
Democratic process to hold the Liberal government accountable, as is our duty as His Majesty's official opposition. So thank you again for being here today. I want to ask you a question briefly about your report. I'm sure you're aware there are there have been multiple Beijing police stations operating at various locations across Canada for the purpose of intimidating Chinese Canadians, students from China studying here, and to silence their democratic right to debate and freely criticize foreign governments. And I was disappointed, however, to see that that was not included in your report. Can you explain why?
Madam Chair, the activities of the workstations are nefarious, widespread here in Canada and here in other jurisdictions. They are the subject of RCMP investigation, which is a rather unusual situation. And because of that investigation going on and oversight activities, we felt it was appropriate to see that investigation through.
Thank you for your answer. I do feel, though, however, that it is warranted and certainly encompassed in the foreign interference sphere that has been talked about quite a bit, and I see that you're nodding in agreement, so I appreciate that. But I do feel that leaving it out does feed into a bit of the perception of bias that has been a criticism of this report and of you leading the report, in the sense that has been a failure of the Liberal government to drag its feet on bringing forward the Foreign Registry Act, Agents Registry Act, which would be the vital tool needed to hold those accountable operating these illegal Beijing police stations that are a very clear violation of our sovereignty, a slap in the face to all Canadians. And yet the tool we need to hold those accountable who are responsible for this, again, the Liberal government has dragged its feet for a number of years. I do feel, sir, that that would have been a well-placed criticism within this report, but there were very few, if any, criticisms of the current Liberal government in the report. And I found that concerning as well that you had left out the Trudeau Foundation, given the leaked report from CSIS that $140,000 had been given through various channels from the Communist Party of China to the Trudeau Foundation, which CSIS said in the leak through a wiretap was found to have been donated for the express purpose of influencing Justin Trudeau, who would ultimately become the Prime Minister. So again, not including that as well leads to perception of bias, sir, whether warranted or not. That certainly, I think, is a valid perception that many people beyond the Conservative Party have pointed out. And I do feel, sir, that, and again, I appreciate that you do not see a conflict of interest with Justin Trudeau or the Trudeau family, but I do have to point out that it is not normal or common, certainly, in Canada that people are friends with Prime Minister's sons, that people have dinner with them, that people go skiing with them. I am a McGill graduate, sir, and I appreciate that you were also at McGill, but you mentioned several times that you ran into Justin Trudeau at McGill, that you saw him there. I can tell you when I was at McGill, I didn't know who the president was, let alone run into him or her on multiple occasions. So I do feel that perhaps there is, because of your long career and your service to Canada, but you have very clear connections to a very elite group of what some call liberal insiders that perhaps you don't recognize. And that has provided a very clear perception of bias with your appointment, sir. Whether rightfully or wrongfully, I do feel that perception, that those who hold them for good reason in this regard. And ultimately, sir, while the report is extensive, it does really downplay a lot of the concerns and the leaks that we have seen and from reputable journalists in the Globe and Mail. It denies certain ones, it calls certain other ones false, that the conclusions were false. You are quite critical, though I do appreciate that you don't see it this way, but this report, sir, is quite critical of media and their discussion of these leaks in the news to tell the public. It is also quite critical of the Conservative Party and the way that we've held the government accountable upon learning on these leaks. And yet, again, it is not very critical at all of the Liberal Party, despite the fact that they have really not held anyone accountable for the police stations, for the intimidation of MP Chong, MP O'Toole, MP Kwan, MP Chu, for the targeting of the Conservative Party of Canada. In fact, the one diplomat expelled would not have been expelled if those leaks had not happened, and yet there is nothing critical about the lack of action to hold anyone accountable for these things in this report. So, sir, I respectfully to you and through the chair, I do feel that the perception of bias is warranted both in the report and given your history with the Trudeau family. And certainly I will just conclude, Madam Chair, that I urge you to respect the will of Parliament, Mr. Johnston, in 3 votes calling for a public inquiry, and that you respect the will of Parliament in honourably stepping down following that. Thank you, Mr. Johnston.
First of all, with respect to no criticism of the government, the report goes into quite considerable detail to say we have a system of dealing with foreign interference that is not working, and point out a number of the areas of defects. Have welcomed the initiatives that have been taken, such as working to now establish a foreign agents registry, which would put that in the public realm. That's been a matter that has had to study because it's got pros and cons, but I think there's action on that. That's very encouraging. With respect to friendship and acquaintances and so on, you suggested that somehow my realm of friends is senior Liberal Party people. I've been fortunate in my life to be the president of 2 important universities in this country, involved in somewhere between 2 and 3 dozen inquiries, advisory boards, and so on. In the course of that kind of work, one is given the opportunity to meet with senior officials, be they Conservative or any other party, and that for me is simply part of my life. So to suggest that I'm part of a Liberal clique is just wrong.
All right, Canada. We have David Johnston. He's going to be on the stand today, and he's going to get a grilling, no doubt. But the Globe and Mail once again has some reporting that's shocking. It's about the Sheila Copps, the lawyer that was hired by David Johnston to assist. So David Johnston's lead counsel on foreign interference probe attended Trudeau fundraiser in 2021 from Robert Fife and Stephen Chase. Former Ethics Commissioner Mary Dawson said that Ms. Block's role is an appearance of bias. So she said it's all she's biased, and what a mess Ms. Dawson's the Ethics Commissioner, former. Johnston appointed. Well, there's many reasons to buy the paper today. The Globe and Mail, National Post, Hill Times, Toronto Star even, and of course the Toronto Sun. I recommend you grab at least a subscription to one of these. Have a good day.
Thank you. Mr. Turnbull.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Mr. Johnston. I was comforted in a sense by the fact that you invited scrutiny into your own findings of your report by giving the opportunity for all parties represented on NSI COP and the security and intelligence experts through NSIRA to review your findings. You've also said today multiple times, and I know it's in your report as well, that opposition leaders were invited and you encouraged them to review the facts in the annex of your report. I take it from Ms. Dancho's comments that she thinks by you calling something false that that's a criticism. I think that's just a commitment to the truth. So how confident are you? It seems you must be quite confident in your findings and conclusions that you've drawn from the facts and within the context that other parties and
Mr.
individuals
Johnston, in some of the responses that you were providing, even though the Conservatives wanted you here and opposition wanted you here for 3 hours, yet didn't want you to answer a single question. I find that very telling. And again, they got their clips. That's what this is really about. This isn't about foreign interference and protecting our democracy, because if it was, they'd ask a serious question instead of playing partisan games. But Mr. Brock mentioned a time period when you mentioned the current Prime Minister was 11 years old. Yet since then, my colleague pointed out, Mr. Turnbull, that actually the leader of the opposition, Mr. Polyev, actually, since that time where you had spent time with the current Prime Minister, 11 years old, Mr. Polyev defended your reputation. We can't find anything that has changed in your conduct or behavior. So all I can conclude, Madam Chair, is that the opposition they're not serious about foreign interference. They're not serious about preserving democracy. They're just looking for partisan attacks. And even Mr. Johnston, you pointed out that some of the same people you